it's my pleasure now to turn the tables, to turn the conversation to Deniece Laurent-Mantey, who is the Executive Director of the President's Advisory Council on Africa Diaspora Engagement. And Denise, welcome to Let's Talk.
Thank you, Denise. Although we spell it a
Yeah,
bit differently.
I know. Hey, but they both start with a D, so we're in good
That's
shape.
right.
Start with a D and end with an E.
That's right.
Well, congratulations to
Thank
you.
you.
This is a fairly, I believe, new initiative
It's a
by
new
President
initiative.
Biden.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and so tell us what this is, because we always hear about what's happening in other places. Then we get the really sad stories about Africa, and we got to kind of address it and change the narrative as it relates to that. So here
That's
you
right.
are. Talk about the
Yeah.
council.
So I think we're in a very exciting time. The council is an advisory council that is situated in the Department of State, where we have 12 members on the council who will be putting together recommendations, suggestions about how we can really engage the African diaspora community in the United States, and strengthen our relationship with, young leaders, with our partners on the African continent. I think, over the past few years, we've seen an increased amount of interest in the diaspora and really, I think strengthening their ties back to the continent. We see it in countries like Ghana, in West Africa, South Africa, Central, in East Africa as well. Whether it's African immigrants or descendants of African slaves, African Americans, there's been I think a huge bulge of interest in just making those connections with our partners and our brothers and sisters on the continent. So, I think it's an exciting opportunity for the U.S. government to also play a role to see how can we bring together the diaspora and use the diaspora as a source of strength for our U.S. foreign policy. And so this council will put forth recommendations, for the administration to really engage the diaspora community across different sectors, whether it's trade and investment, whether it has to do with educational exchange programs, or just, equity and opportunity for the diaspora community in the United States.
I mean, this seems like it's such a how can I say it? Something that just makes a whole lot of sense. And I'm wondering if this is our first go, the U.S.'s first goal or Africa's first go at this. I mean, have we seen anything like this before? And do we have a track record idea of whether it was
Sure.
successful and why not if it wasn't?
So this is the first time I think our Africa engagement has come to this level. The president signed an executive order back in December during our U.S. Africa Leaders Summit to codify this council. There's never been an advisory council that brings together the diaspora at that level before. I will say in the past, there's been a number of members of Congress, as well as other U.S. officials who have tried to put something together like this, but it just quite didn't come together at this level. So for the first time, we see, a council coming together where they can advise the president, advise the Secretary of State about how we can get the diaspora involved in our foreign policy, and also the bridge with the domestic policy as well. Right. And so how, we can strengthen those connections. As I said before, the diaspora is a source of strength for this country. And I think that it's a great opportunity for us to utilize the expertise and also the unique set of experiences that the diaspora has when it comes to our U.S. Africa foreign policy.
I don't want to get too elementary here, but I think it's important because we keep using the word diaspora. Can you tell us what that means as far as the council, how the council defines it?
Sure. So we're defining it as, African immigrants. And so, those who've immigrated from the continent to the United States, but also descendants of African slaves. And so that includes African Americans as well. And so that's our definition of diaspora. It's an inclusive definition. I think it's not a secret that sometimes the word diaspora can oftentimes, cause some confusion. among the community, whether it's just African immigrants or whether it's only African Americans. Are they included? Are they not included? But the African Union also defines, African diaspora, and so we're also aligned with the African Union's definition of diaspora, which is more inclusive. And so this is an opportunity for us to work with African immigrant communities, but also descendants of African slaves, African Americans who've been, in the United States for significant amount of time historically.
Thank you for that. And I hope I have this correct, but I'm sure you can correct me if I'm wrong. But isn't this the final year, the last year of the UN's
The
observance
permanent
of the
forum.
well, decade of
The decade, yes, of
yeah,
of of African
descendant,
descent. It
right.
may be the last year. I know you actually are right. It may be the last year. I'm not too sure, but there was an entire decade where they were celebrating people of African descent globally, across the globe, and so that includes the global diaspora. There's a large diaspora population, for example, in South America, in Haiti and Brazil. And so there was an entire decade that the UN has set aside to celebrate, people of African descent. And I think you're right. It may be the last year. Don't quote me on that one. It is a UN thing, but we of course have worked closely with many stakeholders that have participated in that decade of celebrating the people of African descent.
What are some of the projects or national policy issues? What are you all going to be working on, let's say in the next year?
Sure. So as the president just announced the members a little over a month ago. So it's still fairly new, but we're really hoping to, have our first meeting, very soon, which will be public, and we'll share sort of the objectives and the platform. Some of the things that I mentioned are, strategies to advance equity and opportunity for the African diaspora community in the United States. Programs and initiatives to strengthen, cultural, social, political, and economic ties between African communities and, of course, the global African diaspora, right? And so, whether that's educational exchange programs, I often say, when I was a student in undergrad, there weren't that many opportunities to study abroad on the continent, right? And so we have a number of programs here at State Department that actually, we bring young African leaders to the United States. And so how can we strengthen, to actually come up with recommendations, to actually come up with programs to take African American students to the continent, right? And so
Hmm.
coming up with some of those educational opportunities that can really strengthen those cultural, and I think political and economic ties. Also programs and initiatives to increase public and private partnerships, right? How can we encourage diaspora investment on the continent? There's tons of U.S. businesses that are interested in investing on the continent. How can we ensure that, one, the diaspora is also taking advantage of those opportunities, right? And so we want, Black business owners to invest on the continent. And so how can we strengthen those partnerships, create more public-private partnership opportunities where the government works with some of those business leaders, small businesses as well as the larger, corporations, and just, increasing, I think, participation of the diaspora, on the continent when it comes to trade, investment, economic growth, and development, programs writ large. And so these are kind of our buckets of objectives and focus areas. Over time, you'll see that we'll come up with a report that would be made available in terms of initiatives that we're recommending and programs we recommend. These are all, like I said, advisory for the U.S. government to implement, and hopefully, I think over time you'll see an increase of the diaspora really engage in our foreign policy when it comes to Africa.
One of the challenge, and this is probably a cheap uh, commercial here, but I think about channels like the Africa Channel and
Hmm.
some of our publications around the country who, really try to focus in on the same kinds of issues, have been doing it historically. And one of the things that I see that we don't do enough of is where there are successes, where there
Yeah.
local or Black businesses in the US that actually have successful business relationships on the continent. Nobody knows about it.
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
there's no way to really promote that. I mean, we know Bob
Yeah.
Johnson, for example, has hotels,
Yeah. In
in several
Liberia. Yeah.
countries. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So there's a lot going on currently, and I'm just wondering what this commission is going to do that's different
Yeah.
to actually help to promote the successes of its work.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's a I wouldn't say concern, but an area of interest for the narrative that has been generated about the continent, right? And I
Hmm.
think that as we encourage more diaspora-owned, media outlets, diaspora-owned TV channels, right? Africa-owned media outlets, Africa-owned
Exactly.
TV channels, right? It will help to kind of change the narrative. There are a ton of exciting things. Africa has the youngest population right now, right? It's a vibrant population. There's a huge technology boom of, the digital economy is booming on the continent, fintech. It has a huge and amazing, great startup culture on the continent. And there are lots of partnership opportunities that we can merge with some of our, best and brightest African American and African immigrant communities who are also leading in that field as well. And
Right.
so I think we now have an opportunity where we can codify some of those synergies, right? And amplify it. And I think encourage it, talk about it, talk about the positive advantage of, like, what we could do when we actually come together. So there's different areas that I think we're willing or hoping to really focus on. And then, of course, messaging, amplify the messaging side of it, and ensure that people are listening. People are aware of the different outlets that are out there when it comes to amplifying, our African diaspora engagement, but also talking about the things that are Africa owned, that are Black owned, that are leading in the space. I often say, sometimes before some of the major fintech companies in the US came out, there were major mobile money platforms in Kenya,
Right.
in Nairobi,
Hmm.
right? And so how can we help them, right? Ensure that these things are on a global platform. We're in a place in our US Africa policy where we say we're really focused on not just what we're going to do in Africa, but what we're going to do with Africa. And so partnership is, I think, critical. It's important. And what we're going to do with Africa, there's a large, interested, vibrant, smart, diaspora community who also wants to become a part of that. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I know. I mean, I've just touched. We've just touched a little bit about what's going to happen, and I can already hear the enthusiasm in your voice. And as you know, we're going to be launching something here at the on Let's Talk called Win Africa, so that we want to help to be a partner in what you all are doing and making sure we get the word out. But
Sure.
before I really, I want to talk a little bit about you in the last couple of minutes we have left.
Sure.
And you say you went to university here, but let's talk about where Denise is from and how she got into this
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, so my parents are from Ghana originally, Ghana, West Africa, but I was born here. I'm, born and raised in the Bronx, New York,
Okay.
and so I've lived here quite some time. But I also lived in Ghana for about 4 years. I did a bit of high school in Ghana and junior high school in Ghana. I went to Syracuse University and to Howard University for
Woohoo!
my graduate degree. So I always say I had the best of both worlds by going to Syracuse and going to Howard. And I had a great experience. I studied international relations, when I was at Syracuse, and African studies at Howard. And to study African studies at Howard for me was, I think, the ultimate experience, right? In my graduate program, it gave me, I think, a very unique and foundational background that I bring to the table when it comes to our foreign policy work. Of course, living in Ghana really sparked my interest in international affairs, and so that's one of the reasons why I decided to kind of follow this career path of international relations. And I've been in this space for about 15 years now. I started as an intern. And so those of you watching, I always say, if you're interested in diplomacy and being a diplomat, international affairs, or just, I think, any career, take advantage of those internships. I started as an intern, almost 15 years ago, and have found a way to kind of work my way up.
Wonderful.
In the bureaucracy
Yeah. Wonderful.
in the career trajectory here, but it's been a blessing and a great experience thus far. And I'm really excited to continue to work on our U.S. Africa policy in the different areas that I've been, really exposed to over the years.
Wonderful. Let me ask you, because I remember if you said it. How long does this commission, is it, its lifespan? How long is it supposed to be
So
operating?
it's 12 members with a 2-year term. So
Okay.
every 2 years we will rotate. It is established in the Department of State, and so we hope that we can continue to bring on new members every 2 years. But it is a 2-year term to bring on new members each time.
But the council doesn't sunset at any point. I mean, there's
Not
no.
not at this time, no.
Okay,
Yeah,
wonderful, wonderful. Well, that's good. So we'll continue to connect and hear the stories about what the council is doing,
that's
talk to
right.
some of its members, but especially talk more about not only the challenges but your achievements as you go
That's
along.
right.
So I want to thank you so very much,
Thank you.
my sister Denise, and for being with us today. And
Thank
know
you.
that anytime you have some things and we haven't called you, just call us
Thank
because
you.
we know that there's a large diaspora community. Well, we're part of the diaspora, but a large
Hmm.
African immigrant community as well
That's right.
in the DMV. So we definitely want them to know about the work you all are doing.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
My
And
pleasure.
enjoy your weekend.
Thank you. Have a great
All
day.
right. Bye
All
bye.
righty. Bye bye.